My fiancé said, "We broke up months ago. You really thought we were still together?" While I was still paying our mortgage and wearing the engagement ring she picked out, I replied, "Understood," packed my life out of our house, and let her believe she'd won. Days later, her sister admitted the whole truth, and I realized I dodged the biggest financial bullet of my life. I don't even know where to start with this. I'm sitting in my truck in a Home Depot parking lot at 2 a.m. because I can't bring myself to go back to our house right now. What I discovered today has completely turned my world upside down, and I'm still trying to process how someone I trusted completely could orchestrate such an elaborate deception. I'm Colton, 31, work as a project manager for a construction company here in Denver. I make about $78K a year, managing commercial builds and coordinating with subcontractors. Not amazing money, but solid for Colorado. And I'm good with budgets both at work and at home. My fiancée Brielle and I have been together for 5 years, engaged for 8 months. She works as a marketing coordinator at a local agency downtown, makes around $48K handling social media campaigns and client events. We bought our house together 2 years ago in Lakewood, a modest 3-bedroom ranch that we got for $380K, with both our names on the mortgage, though I put down most of the $76K down payment since I had better savings habits. The house represented everything we were building together. We'd spent weekends at Home Depot, picking out paint colors, planning a kitchen renovation for next spring, talking about converting the basement into a home office where Brielle could freelance on the side. She'd gotten so excited about installing built-in shelves in what we called the future nursery, even though kids were still a few years away. Looking back, I wonder if any of those conversations were real or just performance art. Brielle's always been the social butterfly in our relationship. Her job requires a lot of networking events, client dinners, weekend conferences, and girls' nights with her college sorority sisters who live scattered across Colorado. I'm more of a homebody between managing construction sites during the day and finishing my project management certification online at night. But I've always supported her career ambitions and social life. I trusted her completely. Hell, I encouraged it. When she'd get dressed up for work events, I'd tell her how proud I was of her building professional connections. When she'd plan weekend trips to visit her sister Jordan in Fort Collins, I'd pack her a cooler and make sure her car was serviced. We had our entire future mapped out. Wedding venue booked for October at a beautiful place in the foothills. Deposits paid totaling about $8,000. Save the dates sent to 150 people. And my grandmother's engagement ring resized for her finger. Brielle had been so particular about every detail, from the specific shade of sage green for the bridesmaids' dresses to the handwritten calligraphy on the invitations. She'd made spreadsheets tracking RSVPs, vendor payments, and our honeymoon budget for Costa Rica. Everything seemed not just perfect, but carefully planned by someone deeply invested in our shared future. Yesterday started like any normal Tuesday. I had a 9 a.m. meeting at our mortgage company, trying to refinance for a better rate since interest had dropped and our income had increased over the past 2 years. The appointment was something we'd discussed over dinner the week before, a smart financial move that would save us about $200 a month and allow us to pay extra toward the principal. I walked into First National Bank feeling good about our financial stability and planning to surprise Brielle with the lower payment news when she got home from work. Monica, our loan officer, pulled up our account and started reviewing our financials when she made a comment that stopped me cold. "I'm glad you're moving forward with this refinance, even though Brielle mentioned she might be looking at solo applications soon. It's really smart to get your finances in order before any major life changes, especially with the wedding planning expenses you two have been managing." Solo applications? Major life changes before our wedding? I felt my stomach drop but tried to keep my voice casual. "I'm sorry. What do you mean about solo applications?" Monica looked uncomfortable, like she'd revealed something she shouldn't have. She glanced at her computer screen and then back at me. "Well, she called about 2 weeks ago, asking about the process for removing a co-borrower from a mortgage and whether she'd qualify for our loan products on her $48K salary alone. She also asked about timeline requirements and what documentation would be needed. I assumed you two had discussed it as part of your pre-wedding financial planning." The room felt like it was spinning. Removing a co-borrower meant removing me from our mortgage. Qualifying on her salary alone meant she was planning a financial future that didn't include my income. I managed to finish the refinancing paperwork on autopilot while my brain tried to process what I'd just learned, but every rational explanation I could think of fell apart under scrutiny. I sat in my truck in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the mountains and trying to make sense of it. Maybe she was exploring options in case something happened to me. Maybe it was related to some tax strategy I didn't understand. Maybe she was planning to surprise me by taking over the mortgage payments as a wedding gift, though that seemed financially impossible on her salary. I called my buddy Wade, who works in our office while I'm usually out on construction sites. Wade's the kind of guy who notices everything and remembers conversations from months ago. Wade, weird question, but has Brielle said anything to you about us having problems? Like, anything at all about our relationship or wedding plans? There was this long pause that told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke. Colton, man, I've been wondering when you were gonna bring this up. I thought you guys were working through some stuff and just keeping it private. She was at Murphy's pub with some dude last Friday night when I was there with Jenny for dinner. When I walked over to say hi, she introduced him as Maxwell, said you two were figuring things out, and that she was exploring her options while you worked through relationship issues. Figuring things out? Exploring her options? I had no idea what he was talking about. Last Friday night, we'd been sitting on our couch planning our honeymoon itinerary to Costa Rica, debating whether to spend an extra day in Manuel Antonio or save money for ziplining tours. She'd been curled up against me wearing my old college sweatshirt, showing me hotel photos on her laptop, and talking about how excited she was to see sloths in the wild. Wade, who the hell is Maxwell? Some marketing director at another agency, Wade said. Tall guy, drives a black BMW. Looks like he spends more on his haircut than I spend on groceries. She seemed pretty comfortable with him, like they'd been hanging out for a while. I figured you knew about it since she was so casual about introducing him. I felt sick. Wade, we didn't break up. We haven't been figuring anything out. We're engaged. We're getting married in 4 months. I was literally planning our bachelor party with you last week. The silence on Wade's end stretched for what felt like forever. Jesus, Colton, are you sure? Because she really seemed like someone who was single and dating. They were sitting close, laughing, touching each other's arms. It looked like a date, not like friends hanging out. After I hung up, I sat there trying to process what I'd learned. My fiancée had been out with another man, introducing him to people we both knew, while telling them we had relationship problems I knew nothing about. Either she was living in some alternate reality, or I was the one who'd been completely blind to what was happening in my own relationship. I decided to do some investigation before confronting her directly. I drove to her office building downtown, parked across the street, and called the main number asking to speak with Brielle about a potential marketing project. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, who I'd met at a couple of Brielle's work happy hours, recognized my voice immediately. "Oh, hey, Colton, are you calling to surprise Brielle again? That's so sweet. Maxwell was just asking about doing the same thing last week, but I told him she prefers when you coordinate surprise visits through me first." Maxwell. Again. "Actually, Ashley, I think there might be some confusion. Who is Maxwell?" There was this awkward pause. Maxwell Henderson, Brielle's boyfriend from Sterling Communications. He's been coming by pretty regularly for the past few months. Wait, are you not... Brielle told us that her engagement ended and she was dating Maxwell now. She said it was amicable and you were both moving on. My hands started shaking. When did she tell you our engagement ended? Back in February, maybe early March. She seemed really happy about it, actually. Said she realized you two wanted different things, and that ending it early was better than dragging it out. She's been bringing Maxwell to all our work events since then. They seem really happy together. I hung up and just sat in my truck, staring at Brielle's office building. February was when we'd started seriously planning our October wedding. February was when we'd put the deposit down on our photographer. February was when she'd insisted on upgrading our venue package to include the premium bar service because she wanted our families to have the best possible experience at our celebration. The timeline was becoming clear, and it was devastating. While we were picking out wedding favors and discussing our guest list, she'd been telling her coworkers that our engagement was over. While I was researching honeymoon activities and putting money aside for our Costa Rica trip, She was introducing Maxwell to her professional network as her new boyfriend. I spent the next hour calling our wedding vendors from their business cards in our home office filing cabinet. The photographer's assistant answered on the second ring. "Oh, hi, Colton. I was actually going to call you this week about Brielle's request to postpone your October booking. She said there were some family scheduling conflicts and you might need to move the date to next spring." Postpone? When did she call about that? About 3 weeks ago. She seemed pretty stressed about it, actually. Said there were some complications with the venue and family travel that you two were still working through. She asked us to hold off on engagement session scheduling until she could confirm the new date. I called the caterer next. Same story. Brielle had contacted them a month ago about potential date changes and asked them to pause menu planning and guest count finalization. The florist told me Brielle had called 2 weeks ago requesting to scale back our floral arrangements significantly, citing budget constraints and possible venue changes. Every single vendor had been contacted by Brielle about delays, postponements, or budget reductions, and I knew nothing about any of it. She'd been systematically dismantling our wedding while sitting next to me on the couch every night, asking what I thought about centerpiece options and whether my groomsmen would prefer navy or charcoal gray tuxedos. The final piece came when I called our venue directly. The events coordinator, a woman named Rebecca, who we'd worked with extensively, sounded surprised to hear from me. "Colton, I'm glad you called. Brielle mentioned you might be reaching out about the payment schedule changes. We received her request to transfer the contract to her name only and adjust the payment plan accordingly. We just need your signature to remove your financial responsibility from the agreement. Transfer the contract to her name only. Remove my financial responsibility." She'd been planning to take over our wedding venue and marry someone else there. The venue where we'd had our engagement photos taken. The venue where she'd cried happy tears when we'd signed the original contract because it was her dream location. I drove home in a daze, my phone buzzing with texts from Brielle about dinner plans and asking if I could pick up groceries. Normal, domestic texts from someone who was apparently living a completely different reality than I was. When I walked into our house, everything looked the same, but felt completely foreign. The photos on the refrigerator from our last vacation to Vail, the paint samples we'd taped to the living room wall for our planned renovation, the stack of wedding magazines on the coffee table, all of it felt like props in an elaborate theater production, where I was the only person who didn't know it was a performance. I opened our laptop and checked our joint savings account, the one we'd been using to pay for wedding expenses and save for our honeymoon. The account that should have had about $15,000 in it now showed a balance of $4,800. Over the past 4 months, there had been regular withdrawals ranging from $800 to $1,200, all categorized as personal expenses, with notes like marketing conference, professional development, and family emergency assistance. Marketing conferences I'd never heard her mention. Professional development that wasn't related to any work training I knew about. Family emergencies that she'd never told me about, despite us talking every single day about our lives and plans and concerns. I called Jordan, Brielle's sister, who I'd always gotten along with well. We'd spent countless family dinners together. She'd been at our engagement party giving a speech about how happy she was that Brielle had found someone who supported her dreams, and she was supposed to be a bridesmaid in our October wedding. If anyone would tell me the truth about what Brielle had been saying, it would be Jordan. "Jordan, this is Colton. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Brielle told you that we broke up?" The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful and uncomfortable. "Oh God, Colton, I was wondering when you'd figure it out. She told me and Mom back in February that you guys ended the engagement because you had different visions for the future. She said you were both staying in the house temporarily until you could figure out what to do with the mortgage and that it was all very amicable. Different visions for the future? I was planning our wedding while she was planning our breakup. Jordan, we never broke up. We're engaged right now. We've been planning our wedding for months. She told me yesterday morning that she loved me and couldn't wait to finalize our honeymoon itinerary when she got back from her work conference this weekend." "That doesn't make any sense, Colton. She's been bringing Maxwell to family dinners since March. She introduced him to Mom and Dad as her new boyfriend and said you knew about him. She said you were both seeing other people while you figured out the house situation, and that everyone was handling it like mature adults. My vision was starting to blur with anger and confusion. Who exactly is Maxwell? Maxwell Henderson. He's some marketing director at a bigger agency downtown. Makes good money, drives a nice car, seems really into Brielle. She said he was helping her advance her career, and that they met through a networking event. Mom really likes him, actually. She was worried about Brielle after the engagement ended, but Maxwell seems to make her really happy. After I hung up with Jordan, I sat in my truck trying to process the scope of what I'd discovered. Brielle hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd created an entirely fictional narrative where our relationship had ended months ago, and she was systematically living that fiction with everyone in her life except me. She was living a double life so complete and convincing that her own family believed we were broken up while I was planning our wedding. I decided I needed to understand exactly who Maxwell Henderson was before I confronted Brielle. I looked him up on LinkedIn and found exactly what Jordan had described: marketing director at Sterling Communications, a much larger agency than where Brielle worked. His profile showed he'd been promoted to director 8 months ago, around the same time Brielle and I had gotten engaged. He had the kind of polished professional photos and extensive network that suggested he was serious about his career advancement. I cross-referenced his social media with Brielle's, being careful not to like or interact with anything. What I found made me physically sick. Photos of them together at Denver restaurant openings, art gallery events, and professional networking mixers, all dating back to February. In every photo, they looked like a couple. Brielle was wearing dresses I recognized, jewelry I'd bought her, smiling the way she used to smile with me in our early dating photos. But what really got to me was realizing how calculated everything had been. These weren't random social events. These were strategic networking opportunities in Denver's marketing community. Exactly the kind of events that could advance Brielle's career. Maxwell wasn't just a romantic replacement, he was a professional upgrade, someone with the connections and industry position to help her reach the senior marketing roles she'd been talking about wanting for years. I started thinking about all the work conferences and professional development expenses that had been coming out of our joint account. The $800 to $900 withdrawals that had seemed reasonable for someone building her career suddenly looked very different. Hotel rooms for romantic weekends disguised as work trips. Expensive dinners at networking events that were actually dates. Professional wardrobe upgrades to impress her new boyfriend and his industry contacts. She'd been using our shared money to fund her relationship with Maxwell while lying to me about every aspect of what she was spending it on. Every time I'd encouraged her to invest in her professional development. Every time I'd told her I was proud of her for networking and building industry relationships. I'd been unknowingly supporting her exit strategy from our life together. The worst part was remembering how supportive I'd been. When she'd told me about important marketing conferences that required overnight trips, I'd helped her pack and told her how proud I was of her dedication to advancing her career. When she'd needed new professional clothes for networking events, I'd encouraged her to spend whatever she needed to make the right impression. When she'd talked about meeting influential people in Denver's marketing scene, I'd listened with genuine interest and asked follow-up questions about how those connections might help her land the senior roles she wanted. I'd been funding and emotionally supporting her relationship with another man while believing I was being a good fiancé who prioritized his partner's professional growth. I called Wade back and asked him to help me move this weekend. "What's the plan?" he asked without hesitation. "She's supposed to go to a marketing conference in Phoenix this weekend. I'm betting it's actually a romantic getaway with Maxwell. Either way, she'll be gone Saturday and Sunday morning. I need to extract myself completely before she gets back." "You want to just disappear?" "Wade, she's been telling everyone we broke up for 4 months while planning our wedding with me. She's been using our joint money to date another guy while wearing the engagement ring I gave her. She's been systematically dismantling our wedding while asking me about centerpiece preferences. This isn't someone who deserves a confrontation or closure conversation. This is someone who's been conducting a psychological experiment on me for months." Wade was quiet for a moment. "What do you need?" "Your truck, maybe 2 of the other guys, and help moving everything I own out of that house while she's gone. I want to disappear from her life as completely as she disappeared from mine." Friday evening, Brielle kissed me goodbye at the door, straightened my collar, and told me she'd miss me while she was at her conference. She said she loved me and couldn't wait to get back Sunday night so we could finalize our Costa Rica hotel reservations. The performance was so convincing that for a split. Second, I almost doubted everything I'd discovered. She seemed genuinely excited about our future, genuinely loving, genuinely committed to our shared life. But that just made it worse. If she could lie that convincingly while looking directly into my eyes, how long had our entire relationship been a performance? Saturday morning at 8 a.m., Wade showed up with his truck and two guys from our crew, Danny and Marcus. I'd spent Friday night after Brielle left photographing everything in the house, especially items I'd purchased or contributed to. I wanted documentation in case there were any legal disputes later about what belonged to whom. The photos also served another purpose. They showed me just how much of our shared life I'd actually funded and built. The furniture in our living room, the king-size bed we'd picked out together, the kitchen appliances we'd upgraded when we moved in, the outdoor patio set where we'd spent summer evenings planning our future, even the decorative items that made the house feel like a home rather than just a place to sleep. I'd paid for probably 70% of everything that made our house livable and comfortable, while she'd contributed smaller items and personal touches. We worked systematically and quietly. All my tools from the garage workshop I'd set up for our planned renovations. All my furniture, including the leather couch she'd claimed to love, but had apparently been planning to keep without me. All my kitchen equipment, camping gear, books, and the 65-inch TV we'd bought for football season. I left her belongings completely untouched, but removed everything that was mine or that I'd paid for. The hardest decision was about Ranger, our 2-year-old golden retriever mix. Technically, he was mine. I'd adopted him from the shelter 6 months before Brielle and I moved in together. He was microchipped in my name, and I paid for all his vet bills and food. But Brielle had bonded with him completely, and I knew taking him would devastate her in a way that felt unnecessarily cruel. On the other hand, I couldn't leave him with someone who'd been systematically lying to me for months, and might neglect him once the emotional drama started and her real priorities became clear. In the end, I decided that Ranger's well-being had to come first. He was my responsibility, and I couldn't trust someone who'd been living a double life to properly care for him when her carefully constructed world fell apart. I packed his food, toys, bed, and medical records along with everything else. While we loaded the trucks, I handled the practical matters that would complete my disappearance from Brielle's life. I called our mortgage company and informed them that I wanted to begin the process of removing my name from the loan. Monica walked me through the requirements. Brielle would need to qualify for the full mortgage amount on her $48,000 salary alone, which seemed mathematically impossible. Or she'd need to sell the house and split the proceeds. I canceled all the utilities that were in my name, electric, gas, internet, and cable, with cutoff dates for Monday morning. I called our insurance company and removed myself from our joint auto policy. I went to our bank and closed our shared checking account, transferring my portion to a new account at a different bank entirely. The joint checking account closure revealed another layer of Brielle's deception. When the banker printed out the final statement, I saw that she'd been making regular transfers to a personal savings account I didn't know existed. Small amounts, $200 to $300 every few weeks, that had been building up over the past 6 months. She'd been quietly moving money out of our shared finances and into her own private account, while using our joint money to fund her relationship with Maxwell. By Sunday afternoon, the house looked completely different. It still contained furniture and belongings, but it was clearly a different person's home now. Brielle's feminine touches, her artwork and throw pillows and candles, were now the dominant aesthetic instead of being balanced by my more practical contributions. The house looked smaller, emptier, but also more clearly hers than ours. I sat down at the kitchen table where we'd planned our wedding timeline just a week ago and wrote a note. I wanted to be clear and factual without being emotional or giving her ammunition to paint me as the unreasonable one in whatever story she told people next. Brielle, I know about Maxwell. I know about the mortgage consultation and the wedding vendor cancellations. I know you've been telling your family, co-workers, and friends that we broke up in February. I know about the joint account withdrawals and your separate savings account. Since you apparently ended our engagement 4 months ago, I've moved out. The utilities will be disconnected Monday morning since they were in my name. The mortgage company knows you'll be taking over payments or selling the house. Don't contact me. I left the note on the kitchen counter with my engagement ring and house key on top of it, took one last look around the space I'd thought we were building together, and walked out. Monday evening, Jordan called me. "Colton, Brielle is absolutely losing her mind. She came home to a house with no power, no internet, and all your stuff gone. She called me crying, asking if I could send her money for the electric bill and help her figure out what happened to you." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth. That you'd called me asking if we thought you two had broken up. And when I confirmed what she'd been telling us for months, you seemed shocked. I told her that if she'd been lying to our family about your relationship status while living with you and planning a wedding, that was messed up beyond belief." "How did she respond to that?" "She tried to backtrack, saying it was all a misunderstanding and that she'd been confused about what she wanted, but never meant to hurt you. But Colton, when I asked her directly if you'd been paying rent and bills this whole time while she was dating Maxwell, she couldn't deny it. She just started crying and saying she never meant for it to get so complicated." Tuesday morning, I got a text from an unknown number. "Colton, this is Brielle. Please call me. There's been a huge misunderstanding. I can explain everything." I didn't respond. There was nothing to explain. She'd made systematic choices over 4 months to build a new life while using me as financial and emotional support. The only misunderstanding was mine, thinking that someone who could deceive me so completely for so long was someone worth building a future with. 3 days later, Wade told me that Maxwell had apparently ended things with Brielle once he learned the full scope of her deception. According to the Denver marketing network Gossip, he'd had no idea she was still living with and engaged to another man.